Life is a journey filled with ups and downs. Every person, whether rich or poor, young or old, faces challenges at some point in life. These challenges can be small, like forgetting homework, or they can be much bigger, like losing someone we love, or struggling with health, family issues, or even personal doubts. No one can escape these moments of difficulty because they are a natural part of being human. However, there is a truth that can give us hope in the middle of these struggles. God already knows what we are going through. Sometimes when life becomes hard, we feel alone. It seems like no one truly understands our pain. Even when we share our feelings with family or friends, we may still feel that no one can completely understand what is happening inside our hearts. But God knows. Even the silent tears we cry in the middle of the night, the fears we hide behind our smiles, and the worries we don't speak out loud. God sees and understands all of it. He knew our struggles even before they reached us, and He knows how to guide us through them. This thought is both comforting and powerful. It reminds us that we are not forgotten. There is a divine presence always watching over us, walking beside us, and holding our hand, even when we cannot feel it. God's understanding is not limited like human understanding. Sometimes even we don't fully understand why we are sad, scared, or confused, but God does. He knows every detail of our situation, from the very first moment to the very end. There are times when we feel that life is unfair. We see others smiling, enjoying, and moving forward while we feel stuck in problems. This comparison makes us feel even more hopeless. In such moments, it is important to remember that God's plans for each of us are different. The struggles we face today may be preparing us for a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate tomorrow. God does not allow pain without a purpose. Even though we may not see the purpose immediately, we can trust that He knows exactly what He is doing. When we accept that God already knows our struggles, it changes the way we respond to problems. Instead of panicking, we can pray. Instead of thinking, why me, we can say, God, I trust you. This does not mean our problems will magically disappear, but it means we will have the strength and peace to face them without fear. It gives us the courage to take one step at a time, knowing that God is walking with us. Sometimes the answers we seek do not come right away. We pray, but the situation stays the same. In these moments, we must remember that delays are not denials. God knows the perfect time to act. His timing is always better than ours because He sees the full picture of our life, while we only see a small part. Trusting God means believing that even if we cannot see a way out, He is already making a way for us. In the end, no challenge is bigger than God's power. No struggle is hidden from His eyes. No pain is too deep for His comfort. When life feels overwhelming, we should remind ourselves, God already knows our struggles, and He already has a plan to help us. Our job is not to figure everything out, but to trust Him, pray to Him, and walk forward with faith. With God by our side, no challenge can break us, and no storm can defeat us. There is a deep and beautiful truth that can bring peace to our hearts. God is always in control, even before we ask for help. Life often feels uncertain and unpredictable. We make plans, but sometimes those plans fall apart. We hope for the best, but suddenly something happens that we never expected. In these moments, we start to feel helpless. We wonder if anyone is really in charge, or if life is just a series of random events. But the truth is, even before we realize we need help, God is already working behind the scenes, controlling every detail. From the very first breath we took, God knew every step we would take in life. He knew the happy moments we would celebrate, the mistakes we would make, and the struggles we would face. Nothing surprises God. What feels like a sudden disaster to us is already part of a bigger plan that God saw long before we were even born. This understanding changes everything. It means that we do not need to live in fear of the unknown because the unknown is not unknown to God. He sees the future as clearly as the present. Often we wait until we are completely overwhelmed to turn to God for help. We believe we have to figure things out on our own first. But the beautiful reality is that God is already helping us before we even ask. Sometimes He protects us from dangers we never even knew were there. Other times He places the right people, the right opportunities, or the right words in our path just when we need them most. Even when life feels out of control to us, it is never out of control to Him. This truth does not mean that life will always be easy. God being in control does not mean that we will never face pain, disappointment, or failure. But it does mean that every difficulty has a purpose. Nothing we go through is wasted in God's hands. Even when we feel broken, God is working to bring something beautiful out of the brokenness. His control is not harsh or careless. It is loving and wise. He sees the whole picture, while we only see a tiny piece. What feels like the end of the road to us is often just a bend in the path that God has carefully planned for our good. When we realize that God is always in control, we can stop living in fear and anxiety. We can release the need to control everything ourselves. We can sleep peacefully at night, knowing that the one who created the stars is also holding our life in His hands. This doesn't mean we stop trying or making efforts, but it means we understand that the final outcome is not in our hands. It is in God's hands, and His hands are strong, steady, and full of love. Prayer becomes even more powerful when we remember this truth. We are not praying to a distant God who might or might not listen. We are praying to a God who already knows, who already cares, and who is already working. Sometimes He answers our prayers by changing our situation. Other times He answers by changing our hearts and giving us strength to endure. Either way, we can trust that His answer is always the best answer because He is in perfect control. No matter how messy life feels, no matter how confusing the road ahead looks, God has already gone before us. He knows the way, and He holds every detail of our story. Even before we realize we need help, His help is already on the way. When we truly believe this, our hearts can rest. We don't have to fear tomorrow because God is already there, fully in control, holding us with love that never fails. Worrying is something we all do at some point in life, whether it's worrying about exams, our future, family problems, friendships, or even things that haven't happened yet. Worry has a way of taking over our minds and hearts. It feels natural to worry when life becomes uncertain or challenging. However, the truth is, worrying does not solve problems. In fact, it only increases fear and confusion, making everything feel even worse than it really is. When we worry, our minds become filled with what ifs. What if I fail? What if something bad happens? What if things never get better? These thoughts play like a broken record in our heads, repeating the worst case scenarios over and over. The more we think about these fears, the bigger they grow. Even small problems start to feel like mountains because our mind is stuck focusing only on the negative possibilities. The problem with worrying is that it does not change the actual situation. If you are worried about an exam, worrying will not make you more prepared. If you are worried about a relationship, worrying will not fix it. If you are worried about the future, worrying will not give you the power to control it. In fact, the time and energy spent worrying could be used to think calmly, make plans, or take positive action. Things that can actually make a difference. Another harmful side of worrying is that it creates confusion. When we worry too much, our minds become overloaded. It's like trying to see clearly through a fog. We can't think straight, and every small decision feels impossible. Even when solutions exist, worry blocks us from seeing them. It keeps us so focused on fear that we forget about hope. We forget about the strengths we already have and the help that may already be around us. Worry also affects our physical health. It can cause headaches, stomach problems, trouble sleeping, and even weaken our immune system. Our bodies and minds are connected, so when our mind is filled with worry, our body feels the stress too. Long-term worrying can lead to anxiety, and anxiety can make it even harder to face life's challenges with confidence. It's important to understand that worrying and caring are not the same thing. Caring means we are aware of a problem and want to solve it. This is a good thing. But worrying means we let the fear of the problem take control, even when we are doing all we can. Caring leads to action, while worrying leads to fear and helplessness. So how do we stop worrying? First, we must remember that most of the things we worry about never even happen. Studies have shown that a majority of our worries are about things that never become reality. Second, we can remind ourselves that we are not alone. There are always people around who care for us, and God Himself is always ready to guide us if we ask for His help. Third, instead of wasting energy on endless fearful thoughts, we can focus on solutions, small steps, and positive thinking. Trusting God plays a big role here. When we believe that God is in control, we realize we don't have to carry every burden alone. We can release our fears to Him and trust that no matter what happens, He will give us the strength to face it. Worrying does not add a single moment to our life. In fact, it only steals our peace and happiness. In the end, worrying solves nothing. It only makes life harder than it needs to be. But when we replace worry with faith, action, and hope, we gain the power to face any problem with courage and clarity. Life will always have challenges, but our response to them can either make us weaker or stronger. Let's choose to let go of worry and walk forward with trust and confidence. Trusting God brings peace because He has a plan for every situation. This truth is both comforting and powerful, yet it is something we often forget when life gets difficult. As human beings, we naturally want to be in control. We want to know what will happen tomorrow, how every problem will be solved, and when things will finally get better. But life does not work that way. It is full of unexpected turns, disappointments, and moments where we feel completely lost. In those moments, trusting God becomes more important than ever. When we trust God, we are choosing to believe that no matter how confusing life feels, He already knows the way forward. Every situation, whether joyful or painful, fits into His perfect plan for our lives. There is nothing random about what we face. Even when we do not understand why something is happening, we can trust that God's plan is always working for our good. This kind of trust brings a deep peace because we no longer feel the pressure to figure everything out on our own. Without trust in God, our hearts become restless. We try to solve every problem ourselves, and when things don't go the way we want, fear takes over. We feel anxious, hopeless, and sometimes even angry. But when we remind ourselves that God is in control, our hearts can finally rest. We may not know the answer, but we know the one who holds the answers. That certainty allows us to breathe, to pause, and to find calm even in the middle of a storm. One of the most beautiful things about trusting God is that it doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. Even in the worst situations, we can experience peace if we believe that God is writing our story with love and wisdom. It's like being a child who trusts their parent to hold their hand in a crowd. The child doesn't have to understand where they are going because they trust the one holding their hand knows the way. In the same way, we can trust that God's hand is guiding us step by step, even when the path is unclear. Trust also helps us see problems differently. Instead of seeing challenges as punishments or random bad luck, we begin to see them as part of God's plan to grow us into stronger, wiser, and more compassionate people. Sometimes God allows difficulties to teach us patience. Sometimes He uses them to protect us from something even worse. And sometimes challenges become the very doorways to new blessings we could never have imagined. When we believe that God's plan is always better than our own, even the hardest moments become easier to bear. This trust does not mean we sit back and do nothing. Trusting God means we do our part, we pray, we work hard, we make good choices, but at the same time, we leave the results in God's hands. It's the peaceful confidence that says, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. The peace that comes from trusting God is unlike any peace the world can offer. It is not the peace of perfect circumstances or an easy life. It is the peace of knowing we are loved, cared for, and guided by someone who sees the whole picture, a picture we cannot see. It is the peace that allows us to sleep at night, even when life feels uncertain. It is the peace that keeps us standing, even when everything around us is shaking. In the end, trusting God brings peace because we remember we are never alone. We are held by a God who loves us deeply and who is working out every situation, even the ones that hurt, for a purpose greater than we can imagine. That is the kind of peace that lasts forever. Prayer and faith are more powerful than overthinking and fear. This truth is something we often forget, especially when life becomes overwhelming. As human beings, our natural response to problems is to think and then think some more. We try to figure out every possible solution, imagine every possible outcome, and prepare ourselves for the worst. Our minds become so full of what ifs that we leave no space for peace. This endless overthinking leads to fear of failure, fear of the unknown, and fear of things we cannot even control. But prayer and faith offer us something far greater than overthinking ever can. They offer us power, peace, and a connection with the one who holds the answers to every problem. When we pray, we are not just talking into empty air. We are speaking directly to God, the creator of the universe, the one who knows everything about us, and the one who loves us more than anyone ever could. Prayer is powerful because it shifts our focus. Instead of staring at our problems, we turn our eyes to the one who can solve them. Instead of carrying the weight alone, we place it in God's hands. This simple act of trust immediately begins to calm our hearts because we remember we are not in this battle alone. Faith works hand in hand with prayer. Faith is believing that even when we cannot see the answer, God is already working on it. Faith means trusting God's timing even when we feel desperate for immediate results. Faith is the opposite of fear. Fear tells us that everything will go wrong. Faith tells us that even if things go wrong, God can still make something good come from it. Fear whispers that we are alone. Faith reminds us that God is always with us. Fear drains our energy and leaves us confused. Faith gives us strength to keep moving forward, even if the path ahead is unclear. Overthinking is a trap. It makes us feel like we are solving something, but in reality, we are only making ourselves more anxious. The more we think, the more we imagine problems that don't even exist. Our minds become like a spinning wheel that never stops, and the faster it spins, the more exhausted we become. Overthinking steals our peace, our sleep, and even our health. But prayer does the opposite. It slows down that wheel. It helps us pause, breathe, and remember that we are not responsible for fixing everything alone. We have a powerful God who invites us to bring our worries to Him. Prayer and faith do not mean we ignore our problems. Instead, they help us face our problems with courage and clarity. When we pray, God gives us wisdom, the kind of wisdom we cannot find by overthinking. When we have faith, we stop being afraid of the unknown because we know God is already there. This gives us the power to act wisely, make good decisions, and trust that God will take care of the parts we cannot control. Some of the strongest people are not the ones who have all the answers, but the ones who have learned to pray instead of panic and trust instead of fear. They understand that faith does not remove challenges, but it gives the strength to overcome them. They know that prayer does not always bring instant solutions, but it brings peace while waiting for the answers. In the end, prayer and faith open a door to hope, the kind of hope that fear and overthinking can never provide. Life will always bring challenges, but we have a choice. We can drown in endless worry, or we can rise in faith and surrender our fears to God. Prayer and faith are not signs of weakness. They are the greatest sources of strength we have. They remind us that no matter how heavy life feels, there is always a greater power holding us, guiding us, and loving us every step of the way. No matter how hard life gets, you are never alone. God is always with you. This is a truth that can change the way we face every challenge, every heartbreak, and every uncertain moment. Life is not always easy. Sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart at once. Problems come from all directions, at home, at school, with friends, or even within ourselves. In those moments, it is very easy to feel like no one understands us. No one sees our pain, and no one truly cares. But even when we feel invisible to the world, we are never invisible to God. God's presence is not limited to good days when everything is going well. He is not only there when we are smiling, winning, or celebrating. God is with us in the moments when we cry in silence, when we are too tired to even pray, and when our hearts are filled with fears we cannot explain. His love does not depend on how strong or perfect we are. Even in our weakest, most broken moments, God stays close to us. His promise is clear. I will never leave you nor forsake you. This promise is not temporary, it is eternal. Knowing that God is always with us gives us a kind of strength that the world cannot give. It means we never have to face anything alone. When we walk through dark times, God walks beside us. When we feel lost, God guides our steps. When we feel weak, He gives us strength. Even when we make mistakes, He does not turn His back on us. Instead, He gently calls us back, reminding us that His love is greater than any failure. This understanding also brings comfort in the moments when no one else understands what we are going through. Friends may not always know the right words to say. Family may not always see the hidden struggles in our hearts. But God knows every detail, every tear, every worry, and every fear. Even before we speak, He knows what we are feeling. This is why talking to God in prayer is so powerful. It is not about saying perfect words. It is about being honest with the one who already knows and loves us completely. God's presence also brings hope when life feels hopeless. Sometimes problems feel so big that we cannot see any way out. We feel stuck, surrounded by darkness. But God's presence is like a light that shines even in the darkest places. With Him, there is always a way forward, even if we cannot see it right now. God can open doors that no one else can open. He can make a path where there seems to be no path. And even when the situation does not change immediately, His presence gives us the peace and courage to keep going. Life's challenges may shake us, but they cannot separate us from God. His love is constant. His care is unchanging. Whether we are standing on the highest mountain or walking through the lowest valley, God is there. His presence is not based on our feelings. Even when we do not feel Him, He is still with us, holding us, protecting us, and working things out for our good. No matter how hard life gets, you are never alone. God is always with you. This truth can be your anchor in every storm, your light in every dark night, and your comfort when everything else feels empty. When you hold on to this promise, you can face anything, not because you are strong enough, but because the one who is with you is stronger than anything you will ever face. With God by your side, you are never alone, never forgotten, and never without hope.